Okay, so I've got the camera mounted so it'll be a bit easier for me to work with and finagle the frequencies. Now, recall that in order to do anything with what I've been talking about for high pass filter, gate, compressor, limiter, equalizer, you've got to select the channel you want to manipulate. So we'll select that channel, and then you see how it's been specified, but the actual equalizer is not on. That is not on, but you have all of these on. So if I turn on the actual equalizer, okay, so there you see that's the actual frequency spectrum that's coming through. Here you have your low end, 100 hertz, and then your mid-range around here. You're at 1 kilohertz here, and then this is your high end, 10 kilohertz and up. Hertz being the measure of frequency, so that's the number of times the wave will oscillate in 1 second. So low hertz values are going to be really slow waves and be really low, whereas high frequencies are going to be really fast waves and sound really high. So you can kind of manipulate where you want your frequencies to be and where you want your peaks. But just to kind of give you an idea of what it sounds like, I'm just going to kind of hiss for a minute, and then you'll be able to hear what kind of comes out of the microphone. So it's kind of like you see how the frequency, the dominant frequencies are kind of changing there. Or vice versa, I can also pull them down. Instead of just giving them peaks, I can pull them out. So you can really tell there, it's almost like I'm moving the fader just because the frequency I was putting into the microphone is primarily that pitch that I was hissing. So, for your vocalist, you might want to give them a little bit of a high, and so it's really crisp and clear. Anytime you put a lot of EQ on here, you got to be careful about feedback though, which is a common problem I'm going to talk about in the troubleshooting section. But the controls we have here, obviously it's easiest just to kind of move it around, but that does not, so you can see it's adjusting these outer two knobs, but it's not adjusting this middle Q knob. The Q knob is just kind of saying, give me the frequencies around the one I specify. So if I make a really high Q, that's a very narrow peak, whereas I make a very low Q, it's just like almost every frequency within like 1,000 kilohertz or 1,000 hertz. So it's probably not the best idea to have a really low Q like that. So I typically keep it around the middle, and then so I can adjust that. So if I really want to add some low frequencies, I can do that. For instance, like the kick drums EQ, it looks a bit weird because I like to get a lot of click when the mallet actually hits the drum. I like to get that, so I have to kind of ramp up the highs, and then because the drum's so big, I do get a lot of lows naturally. The snare is pretty flat. That is the toms EQ, which is really interesting. Kind of cutting out the lows just because it can be overwhelming. Any other interesting, that's the basses EQ, so kind of emphasizing the low end on the bass. That's the keys, Zach's guitar, another guitar, acoustic guitar, vocals. See how there's kind of a peak at the high end here, and then secondary vocals, I don't really have much of an EQ on that one. Joe, I'm kind of pulling out the low end and certain frequencies that feedback often. So that's kind of how the equalizer works, and kind of nice tool to use on your soundboard. So that's the equalizer.